losses, and back then everyone was afraid of me. You know,
Yeah,
back then I was very strong.
you were.
Well, of course I still am, you know. You remember the photo I showed you?
I know, Hagrid. I know.
Sunbelt Billy. Sunbelt Billy?
After accepting the job as head coach at Florida a year ago, Billy Napier quickly drew ridicule from Florida's rivals. Billy Napier had just won the Sunbelt Conference prior to joining Florida, and a Georgia YouTuber named Uncle Lou called Billy Napier Sunbelt Billy on one of his trash talk videos, and the name stuck. And 1 year later, in the books, we decided to give Sunbelt Billy his annual review, his report card, and we can do it together. First, what were the expectations and what were the results?
That word expectations, I mean, you can expect something. That's an expectation. What did the Florida fans expect? Expect to win. They remember Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer championships. I assume they still remember those. They used to do those a lot. Lately, it hasn't been the case. So, was Billy Napier supposed to be getting Florida back to championship alley? Or was he just another coach? We'll find out. Expectations of what Florida, I think, is high. And so we have to put the bar high to evaluate Billy. But it's just been 1 year. But expectations are high. Let's talk about that for just a minute. Everybody's seen their season. They went 6-6, lost a bowl game, went 6-7. So it was a losing record. That's not quite championship caliber. For the season, what were the expectations for the season? We don't expect them to win a national title. So Billy Napier has a problem. His team is not at a championship level, but his expectations overall, that's what the fans really want. Or at least that's how you'd have to look at it if you're Billy Napier. It's our job to evaluate Billy Napier, or Sunbelt Billy. So I brought in some other counsel, General Beauregard to my right. General, how do you see what Florida's got to do? And did they do a good job hiring Billy Napier? Well, you have to look at it from the standpoint of Florida's position with the rivals. I mean, their main rivals is Georgia, the number one, and you have to compare how they're doing against those major rivals. Georgia, LSU, and Tennessee are just must wins. And historically, they've done well against them. They've had moments they couldn't beat them, any of them. Right now, they got a really bad streak with LSU. There's a Tennessee a couple times, and they lost to Georgia 5 out of 6. Now, those things used to go the other way back when coaches were named Spurrier and Urban Meyer. Well, you heard the general, and General Will Muschamp, Jim McElwain, Dan Mullen, and now Billy Napier. Florida sits at a crossroad. Playoff expansion, the NIL, and the transfer portal. How do you see Florida shaping up? Well, it's what direction Florida takes from here that will be a long way to defining the foreseeable future of Florida football. All those coaches since Urban Meyer, they have failed to maintain the Florida standard, which is, everybody in Florida knows what that is. But when you have a set standard and you fail it, you have to try to get to that. Historically, Florida's won a lot of football games, but no SEC titles until Spurrier came along in the 90s, and then Meyer, and both won SEC titles and national titles. And the last dozen years for Florida has been a quest to find the next great coach. So the big picture issues aside, Florida right now needs to get a good team. They need to have a bang out year. Florida needs to have a year like Tennessee had. But will that happen the way the program is going with Napier? Right now the question is at quarterback. Bringing in Mertz from Wisconsin or wherever he came from last seems to be a desperation move. He did sign some quarterbacks in the last signing class, but that's not going to help next year, and he may have to go to the transfer portal even still after Mertz. So Billy Napier needs a quarterback. He needs a better defense. He's got holes all over the field, and he needed a big recruiting class, General. Yeah, he did, and he got a pretty good one. Most people put it around 12 to 10, and that's kind of what he's going to have to do. It might be about what Florida. It's kind of what Florida would do on their up cycle, but at some point he's going to need to get a top 5 class, in my opinion. But the transfer portal can be a great equalizer, and it also can be a great destabilizer of clubhouses. So right now, you're correct. Right now, Billy Napier just needs to win, and everything will work out. So Billy Napier's proven he can recruit. Now, of course, he's been called Sunbelt Billy for a reason, because most of his recruiting was done in, the Sunbelt Conference. And could that transfer and translate to success at the higher level? He recruited a nice top 10 class, generally speaking. I think he gets a check mark for his recruiting in this season. I think he gets pretty much no check marks for a lot of other things on the field. This team is disappointing. Most disappointing was the same problem that Dan Mullen had, and the team seemed to disravel, to come apart at the seams somewhat toward the end. Not quite as bad, but it still had that feel to it. And so what Florida needs is a good season, 8-9 win, beat somebody not supposed to, maybe get a U or 6 bowl, and have people show up and they win. Because that's what Florida's going to have to do. And before you can turn around, that's going to be what we're asking them to do, is basically qualify for the 12-team playoff, which that's something that Florida is probably getting in position. Next couple of years will be somewhat rough waters for Florida. The direction they're headed is what's important. How well the recruiting stays, how well Napier shows a tendency to be a CEO, and how well the administration and he work together is going to decide whether this becomes a dead, tired, blue blood program like Nebraska, a train wreck like Tennessee had for years, or is it just going to be a very solid program that hit a rough patch, and Billy Napier was the answer. Only time will tell. And the other question is, how much time will Florida give it?
I'll tell you, Susan, back then everyone was afraid of me.
Yeah,
Back then I was very strong.
you are.
Well, of course I still am. You remember the photo I showed you.
I know, Hagrid. I know.